Big Brother stars Rylie Jeffries and Katherine Woodman finally reunite in Oklahoma. This is big news as the two were not together for a while after the show. There was a lot of toxic behavior from Rylie that fans saw on the show. He needed a lot of time to reflect on this after getting evicted. However, the two are now back together. Keep reading to find out more about this situation. Rylie Jeffries received a lot of hate while he was on Big Brother. He was always getting mad at Katherine and seemed controlling in a sense. Fans did not like this toxic behavior and wanted her to run far away from him. However, after he was eliminated, he took the time to work on himself. When Katherine was eliminated, they did not see each other. Rylie did not like how the world viewed him on the show and felt as though he needed to work on himself if this was going to work. Fans were glad that this was what he thought he needed to do. Katherine did have Rylie's back throughout it all and in the media. So, this helped him get through it a little more. Rylie Jeffries and Katherine Woodman have finally reunited in Oklahoma. They were happy to see each other and seemed to be doing well. They finally reunited after weeks of processing emotions. Katherine has been really eager to see him and wanting to make things work, but Rylie needed time. He's doing a lot better now and was so excited to see Katherine. I know he appreciated how she had his back in the house after he got evicted and how she had his back with the public too. They are not officially dating. However, they are very much together. It seems as though the two may not be officially dating. However, they are definitely back together. This is not shocking for fans to hear, given how they were on the show. However, viewers are hoping that Katherine will recognize the bad behavior that Rylie Jeffries stepped out first, hands in the pockets of a worn denim jacket, his hair a little longer than it had been on the show. He walked like someone still learning how to carry himself outside the arena of cameras and confessionals. His expression was deliberate and guarded, as if he'd practiced neutrality until it felt like a muscle memory. Around his neck hung a thin silver chain he rarely took off, a small concession to the person he wanted to be instead of the caricature he'd become for many viewers. Katherine Woodman came next, bright and unhurried, like a person who knew where she needed to stand and what she needed to say. She had that calmness that had drawn people to her in the house, steady eyes, a laugh that started low and built, and a patience that didn't feel like timidity. When she saw Rylie, she did something that surprised a few people waiting nearby. She smiled first. It was a smile without demand. It was the kind of smile that suggested she had spent the weeks since eviction planning nothing more elaborate than an honest conversation. They hugged. It was brief, the sort of hug that confirmed presence without erasing distance. The cameras weren't here, but the world had watched their story unfold for months, alliances forged, tempers flaring, and a dynamic that for many viewers had slid into the territory of toxic. Rylie's outbursts, his moments of brusque dominance, had been replayed and dissected on social media. Fans had shouted advice from the safety of comment sections, some demanded Katherine distance herself, others asked for nuance. Now, in a quiet airport terminal, there were no trending hashtags to sway how they greeted each other. The reunion was, for them, a raw logistical decision, a meeting in a neutral place, far from the immediate glare of the show's fallout, chosen in part for its anonymity and in part because Katherine's family lived within driving distance. They were not there to perform, they were there to be human. What was it like, getting back out there? Katherine asked after the initial small talk. Her voice held no accusation, it was curiosity shaded with care. Rylie paused. He looked toward the window, through which a pair of teenagers were arguing over a skateboard trick. Loud, he said finally. And at first, smaller than I thought. Like everything that happened in the house blew up and spread, but my day-to-day was emptier. It gave me time. It gave me a mirror I couldn't ignore. It was a simple exchange, but in it were the bones of everything they would have to reckon with. The weeks apart had served as a crucible. Rylie had retreated from the noise, the headlines and comments, and the echoes of toxic. He'd signed up for therapy, he told Katherine later in the car as they drove down a two-lane road, windows down, the wind catching the hem of his jacket. I didn't like who I was, he told her. I didn't want to be someone people were afraid of. I knew I'd hurt you in ways I couldn't just apologize away. Katherine listened. She had spent sleepless nights scrolling through posts that turned real moments into fantasies of villainy. Friends had urged her to run, creators online had solidified an image of Rylie that made their private conversations feel public property. Yet she had also watched him be kind in corners of the show not everyone noticed, and she had seen the man he could be when he tried. That complexity is what kept her from writing him off. You changed because you were afraid of what other people thought, or because you wanted to be different for you? She asked from the passenger seat, watching the light move across the dashboard. Riley's jaw worked. Both, he admitted. But mostly for me. I realized I'd let the show and the moment justify bad behavior. That's a terrible place to let your morals live, in a justification. Oklahoma felt like the right place for this. It is not the sort of state that expects celebrity to drop down without consequence. Folks here treated the reunion as another human story, two people trying to be better. They walked through town arm in arm that evening thinking it would be easier than it was. Local reporters asked for comments, fans approached seeking selfies, a barista handed them complimentary pies with a kind of curiosity that felt less invasive than on-screen scrutiny. They declined interviews, smiling politely, asking for the same simple kindness they offered, to be seen, but not consumed. The process of reconciliation, or whatever this would become, was not cinematic. It had the messy, unglamorous rhythm of learning someone's nervous tics, the weight of pausing before certain subjects, the slow repair of trust. Rylie made mistakes. He said a word too sharp in a conversation about their time on the show, and Katherine stopped mid-step, brow furrowed. You're doing that thing, she told him gently. The thing where you get defensive when you're insecure. He swallowed. Old habit. Katherine reached for his hand. I want to be here if you're trying, she said. But trying without changing is the cruelest kind of hope. That line, indifferent to the cameras or comments, carried them through the weekend. They met with people Rylie had hurt while in the house, and he offered apologies that were plain and unadorned. He addressed behavioral patterns not as branding but as accountability. He listened more than he spoke. In a small coffee shop, a woman who'd been unsettled by Rylie's television persona sat down with them after their host suggested it. She spoke about how difficult it felt to watch heated words between two players and then see a man leave treatment-free, unchanged. Rylie did not make excuses. He said he understood her fear. He promised, not grandly, but simply, to learn from it. The woman left saying she hoped the change would last. Katherine's role in all of this was complicated. She had been both a target and a shield on the show, sometimes caught in the fray simply because she stood nearby. Fans saw her as a victim of someone else's impulses, some cheered that she had the strength to stand up for herself, others criticized her for staying, for defending, for not exiting quicker. In Oklahoma, she navigated those expectations carefully. She was not interested in the performative gestures of social media-friendly forgiveness, she wanted substance. There's a lot of noise out there pushing you and me into boxes, she said privately one night, when the wind sounded like distant applause across the prairie. People will tell you to be the villain or the brave one. I don't want to be either of those things for them. Rylie nodded. I don't either. What emerged between them was not a fairy tale reconciliation. It was, at points, a portrait of two adults figuring out how to make their emotional household run smoother. They argued about petty things, music choices, who left the light on, and then circled back to the big, terrifying conversations, jealousy, control, and what healthy partnership looked like outside the pressure cooker of television. There were unexpected moments of tenderness too. Rylie, previously stoic in public, would take Katherine's hand in the middle of a busy street and stare at the lines on her palm like he was reading a map he intended to follow. Katherine laughed more in those moments, and it surprised her that her laughter could feel like a small rebellion against the narrative built by strangers. Do you think the narrative will ever change? She asked him once, when they were alone on a bench in a park, the sky clearing after a storm. I don't care if it does, he said, then corrected himself. I mean, I do, but not like I used to. I care whether I can sleep at night knowing I tried to be better. Part of the reason fans cared so much about their story was the insistence on binary identities, villain and victim, hero and bystander. Reality television has a way of compressing people into labels because it needs neat catechisms for viewing. The social media aftermath, however, revealed something else. People are messy. They are often mixtures of good impulses and bad ones, and the question of whether someone can change is not rhetorical, it is the one that matters most in the quiet aftermath. When they posted their first joint photo after the reunion, a candid, unfiltered image of them at a roadside diner, hands wrapped around steaming cups, the reaction online was predictably polarized. Some fans cheered, happy to see them reunited and calling for a second chance narrative. Others warned Katherine, sharing old clips and commentaries like evidence in a case. Rylie read the messages in bursts and then turned off the notifications. He chose, deliberately, to step away from the theater of constant appraisal. "I want to be the kind of person who can take criticism and not dissolve, but also not let it define me," he told Katherine, hours after the post, as they lay awake listening to the night insects. "I don't want to justify my old behavior, and I don't want to run from the consequences." Katherine, practical as ever, wanted to set boundaries. "We can't ignore what people think," she said, "because it affects how we move through the world. But we also can't let their worst moments become the definition of our entire lives." They made a pact, to be honest about the work they were doing, therapy, conversations with friends, reading about communication patterns, without performing penance under the microscope. They would not hide the fact that Rylie had been evasive and explosive at times, nor would they let the past dictate their future. This commitment felt like a small, mutual miracle. The weekend closed with a small gathering at Katherine's aunt's house. It was the kind of scene that would likely never trend on social media. Casseroles, mismatched chairs, a game of Scrabble where both of them were more interested in the laughter than the points. Rylie played poorly and with glee. Katherine teased him for it. The aunt complimented their politeness. There was nothing cinematic about forgiveness in the living room. It smelled faintly of soap and old perfume. When it was time to say goodbye, they did not stage a dramatic exit. They hugged in the driveway beneath a sky smudged with violet. Rylie pressed his forehead to Katherine's for just a second and drew a breath like someone committing a memory to muscle. "I'll call you," he said. "You will," she answered. She smiled and let the words act as both a test and an offering. They left with no grand promises. They left with something more precariously honest, a willingness to try. It was not instant absolution, it was a slow business of repair that neither of them expected to be perfect. They knew fans would debate them, and they knew public opinion would oscillate between pity, skepticism, and praise. But the reunion in Oklahoma was their small private decision to continue. Back in the city, when the posts and comments rolled in, Katherine and Rylie occasionally read through the criticism together. Sometimes the words stung. Sometimes they laughed at how quickly strangers judged. Mostly, they talked about the work. Rylie kept appointments. He checked in with Katherine about triggers. She, in turn, practiced saying what she needed without fear.